want to talk about what's going on in Ukraine from a shamanic perspective, at least from my own personal perspective. I cannot speak for any other shamanic practitioners out there, or shamans, or indigenous people, or whatever, but I can speak from my own perspective as somebody who practices and teaches shamanism. My name is John Moore, and I am a shamanic practitioner and teacher. I live in the state of Maine in the US. And as I record this, it is middle of March of 2022. And the biggest sort of newsworthy event going on in the world right now is the Russian invasion and warfare going on in Ukraine. This invasion is A, in violation of international law, B, causing significant human suffering, as all war does, but this seems to be war that has taken a turn where it is specifically targeting civilian populations. So the Russian forces under President Putin have been attacking dozens of hospitals and schools and homes and theaters where people are taking shelter, and the death toll is rising. On the other side, and I'm not trying, I mean, obviously we side, it's hard to not take sides here. Clearly I'm going to take the side of Ukraine, since they're the ones, they didn't ask for this, they didn't start this. It serves no purpose other than some power-hungry individual seeking to extend his power over this area and reconstitute the Russian Empire or the USSR or whatever this person's goals are. However, this is not to take away from the suffering of the Russian people and the Russian soldiers, many of whom are, many Russian soldiers have died, thousands have died. We don't know exactly how many. Estimates currently are, above 7,000. That's huge. That's more people. That's a lot of people. That's twice as many as died in 9/11, for example, or more than twice as many. And that doesn't count the people who are injured, held captive, that sort of thing. Although it appears the Ukrainians are being kind to the captives that they have taken, the Russian captives they have taken. But a lot of these Russian soldiers are conscripts, meaning they're drafted in. They're not professional soldiers. Many of them arrived not knowing what they were supposed to do. Oh, we're just sending you on some exercise. Oh, all of a sudden, start shooting at these people some of whom are your friends and your family, right? Because there's really the Russian and the Ukrainian people are related and have had long friendships, and some people have family and all kinds of stuff. So I feel for those people as well, particularly because this is driven by one individual, right? The President Putin has driven all of this suffering. This is clearly sociopathic. This is not, it can be really hard to justify war, for example. But in World War II, the United States held off entering until we were attacked. And then when we were attacked, we entered the war, and there can be ongoing debate for the rest of eternity about whether we waited too long or could have stopped things before they got really bad, or all kinds of stuff. I'm not going to conjecture about that, but there was at least some sort of justification for entering that war, where this just seems to be an invasion power grab. All of the propaganda around it is false. The stuff coming out about calling the Ukrainian government or the people or the president, Nazis, when the president is Jewish and lost loved ones during the Holocaust. You know, that's some pretty severe propaganda. That's just ridiculous. So that's sort of what's going on a temporal level. What happens from my perspective when there are global events of mass suffering, such as this, or also natural disasters that can occur that cause a great deal of loss of human life, is a little bit like if you remember from Star Wars when the Death Star blows up the planet Alderaan, and I'm really nerding out here, I apologize. And Obi-Wan Kenobi says, you know, I feel a disturbance in the Force, like millions of voices cried out in pain and were suddenly silenced, or something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing, but it's a little bit like that. There's this disturbance that is almost electric that can be felt by people who are sensitive, and shamanic people are. We are constantly working in the spirit world, but that is not separate from the world that we live in. It's not separate from, you know, middle world ordinary reality, the physical world. It's just, it's an overlay, it's an extension, it's just a different frequency, but they touch, they interpenetrate, they affect each other. Shamanic healing, for example, we work on the spiritual level to try to affect healing frequently on the physical level. And so those things do touch and interact. And so when there is a mass suffering event, and particularly one that's prolonged like this, you know, people who are sensitive are definitely picking up on this. And people who practice shamanism, if they aren't sensitive to begin with, and most I would say have to be, gain more sensitivity over time. And so when we see atrocities happening, it can be overwhelming sometimes. And so I know it can be overwhelming for a lot of people. And even if you don't practice shamanism or you know, any other form of spirituality, just watching what's happening on the news and feeling helpless about it can be very overwhelming. It's a kind of a secondhand trauma. It's like secondhand smoke. It can still be traumatic for us because we are sensitive. Unless you are a sociopath like Vladimir Putin is, we are sensitive to human suffering, and it's very, very difficult for us to see that. It causes us some level of pain and discomfort and trauma, and can make us feel helpless. And the feeling of helplessness, the feeling of not being in control, along with experiencing trauma, even secondhand trauma, this is a recipe for soul loss or long-term traumatic effects. And on top of that, we're kind of coming out of the pandemic, which has been going on for a couple of years. Things are getting better. We don't know if they'll spike up again, but things seem to be getting better right now. Restrictions are lifting. Things are sort of going back to normal. But there's still a lot of trauma and sort of low-level soul loss that has happened over the past 2 years. And so to kind of cap that off with this war, and then, you know, there's the threat of nuclear war, the threat of war expanding into other areas of Europe, and you know, chemical weapons and all kinds of things. That fear and that lack of control can cause us a lot of psychological pain, can cause even some spiritual damage over time. There's a type of soul loss, and when we talk about soul loss, it's essentially like losing an essence, losing some essence of yourself, and it usually comes from trauma. But there can also be, when you're under extreme stress for a long period of time, there can be sort of this slow leak of soul essence. And that can be repaired by seeking out a shamanic healer. Something I recommend for pretty much everybody. You know, if shamanism doesn't jive with your worldview, then that's probably not going to be a great option for you. But I think everybody, if they were open-minded, could benefit from soul retrieval, which is the ceremony that shamans perform to alleviate soul loss. So, you know, this might not be new advice from me, because this is something that lots of people talk about. And, you know, one of the ways we can sort of take control of our own mind and our emotions and have some level of peace around things is to choose what we focus on, to choose to focus on what we do have control over. What do we have control over? Well, you know, we don't have control over world events necessarily, but we can donate to humanitarian causes. We can pray, meditate. We can, if you practice shamanism, you can journey, you know, with an intention of supporting and healing the people of Ukraine. And, you know, also with the intention of bringing peace to that region. And I know lots and lots of practitioners are doing this. And there are large groups of shamanic practitioners that will connect over the internet when there are global catastrophes, and will do work together to try to support the survivors and support the dead. Because our work in shamanism, our work isn't done when a person's body stops being their vehicle. We still work with that person and help them along and help the transition when we can. It's not something when there are, I'll say this, if you have any amount of shamanic journeying experience and you want to help in any kind of mass casualty event, this is not something you should do by yourself. This is something you want to do with a group of people or a team of people. Trust me when I say that even in a group, which I've done work in mass casualty events with groups, it can be emotionally very overwhelming. There's a great deal of sadness for me, experiencing deceased children is very hard, very difficult for me to deal with. It's not to say I won't do the work, because I will, but it's emotionally very challenging for me to see children suffering and to see children who are deceased and that sort of thing. So what you can do is focus on what you have control over, and you have control over yourself. You have control over your finances. There are lots. The Ukrainian people will need support for many years. The damage that's being done there, you know, whenever this thing ends, and hopefully that is sooner rather than later, there are cities that are 85 to 90% destroyed. You know, cities where people lived, people went to school, where there were hospitals, where there were, you know, businesses, all of these things. So when this is over, I would urge people not to forget the Ukrainian people. Like right now, this is all over the news. This is, you know, front and center in everybody's mind on social media and all of these things. When the hostilities end, though, it's going to be really important not to forget these people and to open our hearts and help them out. So another thing, and I borrowed this from Mr. Rogers. You know, I loved Mr. Rogers growing up. I still love Mr. Rogers. You know, I just think he was the embodiment of positive masculinity as opposed to toxic masculinity, which is the opposite of Mr. Rogers. And I think he's a fantastic example for men in this world to be nurturing and educational and to embrace a softer side that is kind. Kindness is strength. Cruelty, we so often associate cruelty and power over people with strength, and that's not true strength at all. it takes strength to be kind. And again, when I look at the Ukrainian people, and when they have captured, Russian soldiers who have been attacking them, and they're treating them kindly and actually putting them on the phone with their mother back home, and all of those things, that's strength. That is strength of character. It's strength of spirit. It's strength of conscience. And that is a shining example of strength. And Mr. Rogers is the same way. He's passed on, but his legacy will live on and on. And one of the things he said when he was talking about disasters and emergencies was something that he got from his mother, and she said, "Look for the helpers." So this is something that you can do as well, even in this situation. Look at the way, and I have friends and people that I work with in Poland, who I've been checking in with as the refugee crisis, as a couple million refugees have moved across the border into Poland, and the Polish people are like donating money, donating goods. A friend of mine, when the refugees first started arriving, went to the grocery store and bought baskets and baskets of personal items that people would need, hygiene items and food and phone chargers and all of those kinds of things, and sent them, and there are convoys of vehicles taking stuff to the border because people need humanitarian aid. People are opening their homes, these countries. And I think, not to get too political, but I think about the United States where, there are politicians who use immigrants and refugees crossing our border as political pawns. As these people are bad, they're coming to take our things, they will use them to scare us. If Poland can reach out and take in a couple of million refugees, the United States can really handle, the humanitarian, taking care of refugees as well. We just can. We're the wealthiest country in the world. We have the resources. Nobody has to lose out on anything. Nobody has to have anything taken away from them. But this concept has been used to manipulate you and I and everybody else. Don't look at the billionaires who are, robbing this country blind. Ooh, look at these poor people crossing the border with their children, escaping war. They're trying to get benefits. That would be really bad if they did. I'm sorry to go down this political route, but what a horrible concept that we can't, because these people were born somewhere else, that they're less deserving of human kindness and compassion than anybody else. So we need to be compassionate to everyone, and I would include the Russian people who did not ask for this, the Russian soldiers, most of whom did not ask for this. Yes, we should prosecute military individuals who are committing war crimes, and we should prosecute the leaders of Russia who are committing war crimes. It's unacceptable what's going on there. But when we see Russian soldiers who are basically like parking their vehicles on the side of the road and running off into the woods, they most don't want to be there. And Russia is sending squads to shoot soldiers who are retreating. So it's a really, really horrible situation for everyone involved. And we just hope that it resolves soon. But look at the helpers, look at the people who are doing good, look at what's going on in places like Poland and Estonia and Hungary, where they're taking care of people. Look at, organizations that are like the Red Cross and other organizations that are providing aid, humanitarian aid, and look at the way the international community for the most part, has rallied around Ukraine. Even as divisive as things have been in the United States over the past 5 or 6 years, especially, the vast majority of the people here support Ukraine. You'll see, it doesn't matter left wing, right wing, somewhere in the middle. The most people support Ukraine and have rallied around it, because we know that these are people who did not choose this and are suffering because of some megalomaniac sociopath who is inflicting this. So if you are a spiritual person, if you are shamanic, if you practice shamanism and you have the capacity to journey, I suggest journeying to ask, what can I do to help the people of Ukraine, and get an answer from your helping spirits. What can I do that will be the most helpful or in the greatest good? And follow up on that. I am working on some things. I definitely offer financial support to organizations, humanitarian organizations, who are doing work out there. I'm doing spiritual work around this. I am checking in with people. I am trying to communicate things like this to you. So look around, and so if you can journey on that with that intention. If you meditate or pray or whatever, just hold the Ukrainian people in your heart, and hold the idea of peace in your heart. Imagine extending the light that is held in your heart out over the world to blanket it with peace, and focus that on the region of Ukraine. And with that, I will leave you, and hope that this has been helpful, hope that this perspective is helpful, and hope that you're also taking care of yourself. There's lots of craziness going on in the world, but you still need to do self-care and take care of yourself. Take care of your emotional and your spiritual needs, your physical needs for sure. And I will talk to you real soon.